What's the boogeyman?
Boogeyman is coming.
Lock your doors, bolt your windows, and turn off the lights.
Boogeyman! Who's the boogeyman? The boogeyman! The boogeyman! The boogeyman! The boogeyman!
Gonna get you. 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 Gonna get you.
You're listening to the AA Horror Highway. I'm Amy Ketchum.
And I'm Amy Kasio.
And today...
And Ketchum is very extra with our intro, but go on.
Today we're going to talk about the one, the only, the original Halloween 1978, which is celebrating its 45th anniversary this year.
This is Ketchum's favorite movie. 45 years.
Yes, I am 45. It is 45. We have a unity of our souls. I am one with Halloween. No, I'm very excited to talk about this. You know, we've been doing this podcast for a few years, and this is one I've always wanted to do. So it's fun that we're actually going to do it during October as part of our Halloween extravaganza.
Yeah, Ketchum is going to school us about Halloween.
Yes. And, you know, I could probably talk about this to the point of having a whole separate podcast. So we're going to try to tone that down today and stick with our normal time limit. But it's been a lot of fun doing the research and learning some new stuff about this movie.
There's a lot to learn. There's so much out there about this movie.
And it's really funny, you know, because it's so short, it's so old, had such a small budget. Written in 10 days, filmed in 20. Why is there so much to talk about? But we'll start to dive into that here in just a little bit. But let's talk about what we've been up to lately. I am just very excited about the success you've been having on TikTok.
Oh my God.
Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, I started experimenting with a TikTok account earlier this year. I didn't really think much of it. But I was doing a project for dance scenes in horror, so I took out the clips of dance scenes in horror movies, and I put them on TikTok. And it's pretty good. And then I decided to do another project for Pride in June on TikTok, which was gay bars in film. And that was really fun. And I mean, I have like over 1 million views on my...
Wow.
I mean, it's total videos, but not that I have like a ton of videos, but still, it's like, you know, over 1 million.
That's awesome.
And I'm gonna see if I have time to do a Halloween project on TikTok. So I've got some ideas. I don't know if I have the time, but I will try. So we'll see what we can get into. Because I am enjoying it.
Do you think that'll be a TikTok live?
Oh yeah, I do want to do because I do make shadow boxes. I make horror shadow boxes and gay stuff. And so yeah, I was thinking I might go live on TikTok because now I have enough followers to go live, because that's a whole thing. You have to have at least 1,000 before you can go live, and so I'm able to go live, and so I was thinking I would just be one of those people who is doing my art quietly, and you can just tune in and watch me doing my art, where I'm cutting up different pieces of basically I would print out horror movie posters and just kind of cut them up and start stacking and layering them so that they look like they're a 3D image, and then putting them into a shadow box. And so that could be like a fun little thing that I do on TikTok, where I'm just filming my hands doing this artwork stuff. So if I have the time for that, I would like to do that. I mean, I'll eventually do it. I just don't know if I'm going to get to do that soon. But anyway, I'm having a lot of fun on TikTok, which I didn't know that I would have. Go ahead.
Do you know what your most popular video was for the queer bars or the horror dancing?
For the queer bars, that would have been for If These Walls Could Talk Part 2. I got the clip of Michelle Williams in the bar with Chloe Sevigny. Is that how you say her last name? I can never remember. Where she's like this masked lesbian, and young TikTok users went crazy. They were like, I cannot believe that this is even a thing that exists, because you actually can't find that movie streaming anywhere. It does not
Right,
exist.
yeah.
It came out in like 2000. I think it was an HBO movie. Nobody knew this existed. It blew up. I think it has almost 600,000 views. As far as like the horror videos, it actually might be American Mary. I have the dance
wow.
scene from that where Catherine Isabel is kind of doing her little strip dance, and then she covers herself in blood or whatever it is that she's doing there. I think that one is probably the most popular one. But there's
Cool.
there's a lot going on over there as far as the content. So if that sounds like something interesting to you, I would say check it out at Amy Kasio. Just AMYKASIO. That's my account. And what have you been up to,
Nice.
Ketchum?
Well, I've been making a song that is going to be featured in a horror movie. I believe it's going to be in the credits at the end of the movie. And I've been having a lot of fun with that. So I get to sit down with that again tomorrow. It's an old hymn. It's called Washed in the Blood of the Lamb. And the movie is also going to be by the same name, called In the Blood. It's a local filmmaker named Doug Strong. And he's had some great success recently out in these film festival circuits with his previous films. So I'm very excited to be a part of it.
That's exciting.
And and I'm still working on my horror book, which I think I've mentioned on here before. But that's kind of taken the back seat right now. But I'm very eager to get back to that as well, which is a true horror book. So it's a bunch of odd history, I guess you could say, odd spooky things that have happened in history.
All right. Can't wait to check that out.
So, why do you want to talk about Halloween?
Me? This is why does Ketchum want to talk about this? This is your favorite movie. And, I mean, it's a classic, so it's time that it happened. What about you?
I mean, well, it's its 45th anniversary, and, it pretty much single-handedly revolutionized the whole genre, I think. And it's currently my favorite horror movie, which is kind of a funny story in itself because I don't know when it became my favorite horror movie. It's really the whole thing's kind of funny as far as my memories associated with this movie because I don't really have any. It's strange. I usually have lots of memories associated with movies and stuff. But yeah, Nightmare on Elm Street was always my favorite until just a few years ago. And then I was like, you know what? This is like the best horror movie ever. And then I just got totally obsessed with it. It's just a strange thing. And like I said, now I am one with Halloween.
Yeah, I have watched it 3 times. The third time being for this podcast episode.
And that is a very reasonable amount of times to watch a movie. Unlike me. So, yeah, I have kind of a thing with this movie. I was telling you the other day, I think I've watched it 400 times. But, I mean, reasonably, it's at least 100 to 200 times. And then everything else is just kind of bits and pieces. But, I mean, just this last week or two, I've already had it on at least like 12 or 14 times.
Oh my God. I mean, you should probably explain that. I don't think you're sitting there just watching it, right? Sometimes it's like background and you just sort of have it on.
Yeah, but it's like, it has just become a part of me. I'm being really serious. It's like always there. So yeah, I think out of those 12 or 14 times, I probably watched it completely maybe 4 times or something, which I think is still a lot.
That is
for
a
1
lot.
week to 2 week. But
one movie.
yeah, like I like to put it on to relax. I like to put it on to fall asleep. It's just a great stress relief for me. It's very relaxing and soothing. And it's just simple and perfect. And I just love it. So, if I'm having a bad day or a hard day, or, if I just want a little something in the background while I'm cleaning, it's always there. It's the gift that keeps on giving.
Yeah, whatever works for you, if that's what does it for you.
So Halloween was released on October 25th, 1978. And here is the plot summary. In the movie Halloween 1978, a 21-year-old Michael Myers escapes from a mental institution and returns to his hometown on Halloween night, where he stalks and murders a group of teenagers. His primary target is Laurie Strode, a babysitter, who becomes increasingly aware of his presence. Dr. Sam Loomis, Michael's psychiatrist, races against time to stop his killing spree. The film builds tension as Laurie fights for her life, culminating in a deadly confrontation where she manages to fend off Michael's attacks. The movie ends on an eerie note, suggesting the unresolved nature of Michael's evil.
So, do you want to tell us about who made this movie, who stars in this movie, all of those details?
Sure. So we have a pretty small cast, so let's just go through them real quick. We've got Jamie Lee Curtis as Laurie Strode, Donald Pleasance as Dr. Sam Loomis, Tony Moran, who plays Michael Myers when he's unmasked, Nick Castle is Michael Myers when he's masked, Nancy Kyes, who was originally credited as Nancy Loomis, as Annie Brackett, PJ Souls as Linda Vander Cloak, Charles Cyphers as Sheriff Lee Brackett, Kyle Richards as Lindsay Wallace, Brian Andrews as Tommy Doyle, and John Michael Graham as Bob Sims. So the key personnel of who made this movie was directed by John Carpenter, produced by Debra Hill. Cinematography was Dean Kunde, music John Carpenter, editor Charles Bornstein and Tommy Lee Wallace, production designer Tommy Lee Wallace, costume designer Debra Hill, and screenplay was by John Carpenter and Debra Hill.
All right, let's get into the pop culture of 1978. Ketchum, would you like to kick it off for us?
All right, so the late 1970s was a time of transition between the cultural movements of the 1960s and the more materialistic and consumer-driven culture that later characterized the 1980s. So we were in the disco era. It was at its peak.
Yes, my favorite.
There was a focus on music, fashion, and entertainment that was just, leading everybody back to disco. And you can see that in the hits of that year. The top song was Night Fever by the Bee Gees. And also the top album was Saturday Night Fever, which is by the Bee Gees as well. This year was the peak for vinyl sales. We didn't transition into CDs until 1982. Grease was the word at the theater. Mork from Ork greeted us with Nanu Nanu on TV. Teens were playing the new arcade game craze called Space Invaders. And between 1978 and 1981, that game collected 4 billion quarters. Garfield was born, as well as the first test tube baby in the UK. His name was Lewis Brown. The first Star Wars action figures were released. Martina Navratilova won Wimbledon. Jimmy Carter was president. NASA announced the first women astronauts in the USA, a group of 6, including Sally Ride. Volkswagen stopped making the Beetle after about 30 years. We saw several advancements in technology, which started to pave the way to the future as we know it. Significant releases were the Navstar GPS launched. Illinois Bell Company introduced their first cellular mobile phone service. And the first computer bulletin board, the BBS, was created. 98% of Americans at that time had a TV in their homes. Misogyny abound. Prior to 1978, the National Weather Service only used female names for hurricanes because the male staff viewed that as most appropriate due to the storms being unpredictable and dangerous. Okay. Home Depot was founded in Atlanta. Aveda shampoo was invented. Tim Burton, he took his first job out of college, which was working on the Lord of the Rings animated film. The top Christmas toys included Hungry Hungry Hippos, Simon, and early gaming systems such as the Coleco Telstar Gemini. The top TV shows were Laverne and Shirley, Happy Days, Three's Company, MASH, Mork and Mindy, All in the Family, Ropers, and Taxi. In the theater, you may have seen Superman, Dawn of the Dead, The Deer Hunter, Grease, Invasion of the Body Snatchers, Jaws 2, Close Encounters of the Third Kind, Animal House, and Watership Down.
I have never seen that, but it sounds
very
grim.
depressing.
Yeah.
Yes. Odd facts. In sport, commentator Howard Cosell commented on his delicious snack to fill some dead air time, and the desire for stadium nachos was born. Turning right on red in the U.S. did not exist until 1978. And in the grim news, Keith Moon accidentally overdosed on pills, a member of The Who. Terry Kath, a member of Chicago, killed himself with a gun after thinking there weren't bullets in it. And then the Twinkie defense got Dane White off the hook for killing Harvey Milk due to diminished mental capacity from eating too many Twinkies.
That's insane.
It is insane. Charlie Chaplin's body was stolen and held for ransom. His widow refused to pay the demand, and his body was then found 11 weeks later. Cult leader Jim Jones tells 900 people that they must drink the Flavor Aid. People love to say Kool-Aid, but it was actually Flavor Aid laced with cyanide. And all 900 people at the People's Temple did die. Serial killer David Berkowitz, the son of Sam, was sentenced to 25 years to life. And that concludes my pop culture for 1978. Did you have any more to add?
I think you covered everything. The only thing I might say is that the average income per year was $17,000 and the rent was $260 a month, which is insane.
Wow.
So let's get into the history of the making of Halloween. This is where we're going to learn some stuff. Or will we? Is it all lore?
Or will
we? There's some tales out there that we are trying to decipher, like what's real and what's not real, you know?
Right. So I'll mention a couple of the more notable ones in this next bit. So Debra and John wrote the script in just 10 days. They injected it with personal touches. For example, Haddonfield is where Debra grew up, but it was in New Jersey. And John grew up in Bowling Green, Kentucky, which he claims provided Halloween with its soul. They had fun naming characters. Michael Myers was a British film distributor who helped put John's previous movie, Assault on Precinct 13, in the UK. Laurie Strode was an ex-girlfriend of John Carpenter. Tommy Doyle is a character in Rear Window. Sheriff Lee Brackett is named after sci-fi novelist and screenwriter Lee Brackett, who wrote The Big Sleep and Rio Bravo, and later The Empire Strikes Back. Sam Loomis was named after the concerned boyfriend of Marion Crane in the movie Psycho. The Panaglide camera was a competitor to the Steadicam, which allowed the camera to be fitted to the camera operator for smooth, unbroken shots, and this allowed them to shoot a ton of footage in one day to make up for such a minuscule budget. So speaking of the budget, it was only $300,000. Although set in Illinois, the movie was actually filmed in Pasadena, California in the month of April. Filming ran for a short 20 days, ending with a little party where John and his band, Coupe de Ville, which was Tommy and Nick, who we'll tell you about here in a little bit, wore Halloween masks while they performed. So I'm going to talk just for a moment about what I'm going to call lore, legend, speculation, or assumption. And, you know, basically there's two key players who kind of take credit for the whole basis of Halloween. So I'm just going to mention both of them. And I kind of feel that the truth is probably a mix of both of these things. So Irwin Yablans, he was a producer, and he played he's still a producer, I believe, and he played a big role in the making of this movie, from producing to funding, from distribution to marketing and advertising. He had his hands in all of it. And he's quoted as saying that this concept was his from start to finish, including the name and the movie poster. Debra and John then wrote a script based on their assignment from him. Irwin wanted a movie like Psycho and Exorcist, meaning one that is suspenseful with little or no blood. And he wanted an iconic staircase, since both of those movies had one. So, as I mentioned already, $300K was their budget, and he told John, you can have whatever you want, final cut, score, your name in the title, and Debra Hill to co-write and produce. And so I guess we can mention here that the movie Exorcist, which he, wanted them to reference, cost 40 times as much as their budget. So in part 2, now I'm going to talk to you for just a moment about Bob Clark. So Bob Clark, you probably remember us mentioning him before because he wrote Black Christmas that came out in 1974, just 4 years before Halloween. He also wrote A Christmas Story and Porky's. So, in 2005, in an interview with Icons of Fright, and now the next part I'm just basically basically going to read to you from Icons of Fright. Clark was asked if there were ever plans for a sequel to Black Christmas. No, I never intended to do a sequel, he said. I did a film about 3 years later, started a film with John Carpenter. It was his first film for Warner Brothers, which picked up Black Christmas as well. He asked me if I was ever going to do a sequel, and I said no. I was through with horror. I didn't come into the business to do just horror. He said, well, what would you do if you did do a sequel? I said it would be the next year, and the guy would actually have been caught, escape from the mental institution, go back to the house, and then they would start all over again, and I'd call it Halloween. So there are 2 origin stories for you as far as the making of this movie and where it has come from. So back once again to their $300K budget. Let's see where it went. So John was paid $10,000, Jamie Lee $8,000. Donald Pleasance was paid the most because he was a more established actor at the time, so he was paid $20,000. Tom Moran, who pulls off the mask in the final scene, was paid $250. And Nick, who was the Shape, or Michael Myers, throughout the movie, was paid $25 a day.
Well, I mean, I heard that. I mean, is this in your notes here that Debra Hill wanted to have Jamie Lee Curtis because she was the daughter of Janet Leigh? Is that her name in Psycho? Mm-hmm. And that's why she wanted her.
Right, yeah.
She's like, I don't care if she can act. I just need this name so that our movie becomes popular. Right.
Yeah, I'm going to expand on that a little bit later. But yeah, her and John Carpenter both are quoted as saying that. But they also, I believe John Carpenter was quoted as saying that Jamie Lee had 3 takes, 3 auditions, and it was on the 3rd one that she really stuck it, and they knew, regardless of who she was, that that's who they wanted. But yes, that definitely had a big pull on them. And, that kind of opens the door to nepotism, which is kind of interesting too, because, Jamie Lee was at a place in her new career that she didn't want that. She didn't want to just be hired because she was Janet Leigh and Tony Curtis's daughter. And then also, if you look at, who made the movie, is that, when John came up with his demands, one of them being that he wanted Debra to co-write and to produce, the cast, well, not the cast, but just everybody on set had a hard time at first because they viewed it as nepotism because that was his girlfriend of 3 years. But apparently she very quickly proved herself as a good producer, and, all that was forgotten.
Yeah. All right, so we can jump over to the marketing.
The marketing campaign for Halloween, it relied on strategic release, iconic imagery, an emphasis on suspense, and the intrigue surrounding the antagonist. So their approach generated anticipation and curiosity, and overall the marketing contributed to the film's financial success.
All right, so let's talk about the impact of this movie on culture, because it has a huge impact.
Right. I would kick this off by saying that the horror genre at that time was completely debased. It was just reduced to like almost nothing, because right before it, we had a lot of really poor quality slashers, if that's what you want to call them, like the grindhouse stuff. It was a very bad time for horror, right? Like there was a lot of new stuff happening with sci-fi and stuff like Close Encounters of the Third Kind, and and Jaws was already out, which was a very suspenseful, popular horror movie back then. But the horror genre was really hurting, and they believed when they were making this. I mean, they didn't really believe that this was really going to become something big, but it's possible, right? So they believed that it only takes one good film to turn around this genre, and basically it's like, to John Carpenter, this was just a stepping stone to his next big thing. But the way that this movie impacted the viewers, it really put horror back on the map, and, like a whole new horror, a new path for horror. And, the whole idea of associating horror movies with Halloween in October, it started a new trend. And I think really what grew the interest in horror from this movie is the fact that it was mostly a suspense movie. and low gore. It really like kept them on the edge of their seat. So on that note, you could say it received mixed criticism, right? Like there were people who just absolutely loved it. It had an instant cult following. We've seen its legacy now over the years, and it's genre defining, and it's a classic, and all these great things. But there were a lot of people who were also really put off by it, that they thought it was a little too much for their senses.
So isn't there a YouTube clip out there of a recording of Halloween, like the audience and their reaction to a Halloween scene, and they are freaking out?
I've never looked it up. I've never looked up any audience reactions like that, but that would be a lot of fun. I did hear an interview with Jamie Lee where she said she went to the theater herself to watch it, when it came out, and that a woman stood up and screamed in the theater, "Don't go into the house." Like it was something that they had never seen before.
Yeah, I heard an interview with John Carpenter saying that he was outside around the corner just listening to everybody screaming inside, and it was like music to his ears.
Yeah.
He loved it.
Yeah, I mean, right, and that's the same thing Hitchcock did with
Psycho?
I think it was Psycho. Yeah, he actually went into the theater and stood in the back just so he could see their response to that type of suspense. So what kind of impact does this movie have on you when you watch it?
Me? I mean, I have only seen it 3 times. So the first time that I watched it was about 10 years ago, so I was in my early 30s. But it's one of those movies that just kind of always existed, but I never really sat down and watched it. And I thought it was okay. I mean, I thought it has like a nice, fall aesthetic, a nice Halloween aesthetic. It's just the thing that can like get you into that kind of a mood, like a spooky season kind of mood. So that's, I mean, yeah, I think it's okay. I'm not like a huge fan like you are. I mean, what kind of impact does it have on you?
Well, I've been trying to think of when was the first time I saw it. I have no idea. And that's kind of interesting too. Like it's just always been there, maybe. Creeping and lurking in the darkness. I remember going to Blockbuster in the mid 90s, early 90s, and they had a classic series. I don't remember what they called it exactly, but like once a month or something, they would feature a VHS tape of a classic, and then you could buy it for like $5 or something. And I remember buying Rosemary's Baby and a Lon Chaney movie, something very old, and Halloween. Those are the 3 that I bought that were like $5 each. And I remember at that time I'd already seen it. I knew I liked it. So that was the early 90s. So I don't know. I feel like probably I was watching this on television in the 80s over and over, just one of those things that was always on. But I don't really have like a deep memory like I do with Nightmare on Elm Street or other 80s horrors, of when I first watched it. But yeah, I mean, obviously it has left a lasting impression on me if I'm watching it over and over still.
Yeah. Yeah, for me, that's weird. I don't remember ever seeing it on TV. It's like the horror movie that was always playing for me was Friday the 13th. Like all of them were just playing all the time in the 90s. And I think I actually watched Halloween on Netflix, like the golden age of Netflix before there was any other streaming services. So they had the licensing for everything. So it was probably like the early 2010s, like maybe 2011 or something, 2012. And it's like everything was on Netflix, everything. And I was like, oh, here's Halloween. Oh, here's Elvira. Oh, here's everything.
So who's your favorite character and why?
I mean, I enjoyed Annie. I just thought she was a lot of fun. She's the girl singing, "Oh, Paul." We're going to make a song out of that.
Yes.
What about you?
Well, Laurie is Laurie. Jamie Lee's Jamie Lee.
Yeah, I mean, she's an obvious choice, but go ahead.
Just this week, I think I already told you this, but I watched True Lies and I watched Freaky Friday because, they're 2 of my favorite movies, but also, they happen to have Jamie Lee in them. Who's one of my favorite actors. But does that mean that she's my favorite Halloween character? I'm really not for sure. So I really like Tommy because every scene feels so natural. Like when he's telling Lindsay, he's going to get you.
He's gonna get ya. No, he's not.
Or when he sees the shape outside, starts panicking and trying to tell Lori that the boogeyman's out there. Like, I just love that kid's natural acting. He's just very good. But I also love Annie. You know, she's sardonic.
God, can you take a joke?
It's just like she's kind of like that friend that everybody has, right?
Mhm.
It's just like this kind of fun, sarcastic, you know, kind of character. So
The friend you want to have and have fun
right.
with.
The friend who constantly gives you a hard time.
She's the one that was smoking the joint in the car, right?
Right.
The friend you want to have. All right, so what's next? The themes of the movie?
Yeah. So, I mean, we've got some pretty common basic themes, but we have to remember that when this movie came out, you know, these themes were not common and basic. You know, we've seen it a lot since then, but, you know, we've got a theme of evil and supernatural. You know, he's not really a normal evil person. He's a bit supernatural.
Mm-hmm.
He's not your normal serial killer. We've got the unseen threat, you know, the fear of the unknown, his hidden face in the mask. We've got a loss of innocence, right? The vulnerability of innocence, childhood innocence. You know, we've got that contrast that's kind of like what we were experiencing in It Follows when we did our episode on It Follows, the contrast between like the peaceful suburban neighborhood and the violence that's going to erupt on Halloween night. Like they're fragile, you know, they're not safe. Final girl, you know, this is one of the first final girls. Empowerment, you know, empowerment of the final girl. We could tie in like small town secrets, you know, as far as like him originally killing his sister, that probably was very shameful for the town. An interesting theme to me is the fear of the mundane. And, you know, that's kind of twofold, like the whole suburban setting of it, like how ordinary everything is. But then also Lori's friends, you know, they're coming up with all kinds of schemes and stuff, but she's being led by her moral compass. And it's like she has a fear, you know, she says a few things that can lead you to believe this, but it's like she has a fear that she herself is living very mundane. And, you know, she wants a more exciting life, but she's continuing to follow that moral compass. And, you know, the final theme that I want to really kind of dive into is the theme of fate. And not just in the movie, but around it, you know, things that were happening in real life. And I found this pretty interesting in my research. So in the movie, when Laurie's in the classroom, they're talking about Samuels, and there's a mention of him personifying fate, the same as the elements, earth, air, fire, water. And they say, no matter the actions that Collins took, he was destined to his own fate. And I took that as foreshadowing of what's to come. So, you know, like the fate of Michael Myers, all of that might be predetermined. You know, the shape in general, his evilness, it's like some predetermined thing that's happening in their town. Like his darkness is natural and unstoppable, like an element. But also Laurie's fate is predetermined, perhaps, to be the survivor of the story. Because one thing that some fans like to deep dive into, which I found interesting, I'd never really thought about it, was that, you know, because of her mundane living or her fear of the mundane, some people believe that she's actually attracting Michael to her. That, you know, she has this sense of, she kind of wants to live a little dangerously. So that's kind of interesting. If he's a supernatural entity, that maybe he is being drawn to her desire to not live shallowly, which is, you know, that's kind of interesting. It's an interesting little take on it.
I bet someone wrote a paper about that somewhere.
Probably so. Also, as far as movie fate, is something interesting that popped up in my research, which again, I have watched this so many times, and I never, ever connected these dots. But when Tommy and Lori go to the Myers house to drop off the key, you know, that's the music's playing. They walk up to the house, and then we start hearing Michael breathing. So we know he's in the house looking out. That scene.
Yes, I am.
That's spook house.
You could say him looking out the window, the first people he's seeing, they're actually coming to his house, which is really weird. Little Tommy is pretty close to Michael's age when he killed his sister, and Lori is the age of his sister that he killed. And some people are tying that together. They're basically saying that triggers him. You know, like he sees the boy and the sister walking up the porch to their house, even though they're really not, you know, but that there could have been something that just triggered him in that moment.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of interesting as far as fate, like that recognition happens and then he's compelled to start following them.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to talk about the real life fate, which is interesting to me. So in the interviews, everyone continually speaks about accidental success. So, you know, this movie was different from other slashers that followed because there's a subtle intelligence that infers subtext. But, you know, this is just part of their accidental success. It's most likely not intentional. And the fate of, you know, what brought me here is always interesting to me, of, you know, people's paths in life. But it's very strong with this movie. So, you know, you've got Debra's journey from New Jersey and John and Tommy's journey from Kentucky. So to remind you, Tommy Lee Wallace is one of John's old friends, childhood friends, and he is the production designer on this movie and also one of the editors. So their journey started in Kentucky. Reflecting on both of their life experiences in those places, they then come together to write this story. And then there's a combo of John, Tommy, and Nick, who becomes one of their best friends in California once they moved to California, and they all work together. So they were working together before Halloween, and they really gel. You know, they're just like a great trio. So that is part of the magic and the fate of this movie. Then there's the fate of John and Debra being a couple for 3 years prior to Halloween, which led to her having a very unique opportunity for women in the 70s, which was to co-write and produce this film. And she was also the script supervisor. And, you know, she proved to be a true natural at production. And that's a key factor in what made this movie what it is. But the one that is very interesting to me is Jamie Lee. So her mother, which we know is the original Scream Queen, so she got her start when an actress named Norma Shearer, whose late husband was an executive at MGM, saw her photo sitting on Janet Leigh's dad's desk at a ski resort that he worked at. So Janet Leigh was not an actress. She just had a nice, pretty picture. And Norma Shearer took her picture back with her to Hollywood. And that is how Janet Leigh became an actress, which is very interesting. So she then becomes, you know, the Scream Queen of Psycho. And Psycho is a large part of what inspired John's vision of how he wanted to craft the suspense of this.
Mm-hmm.
But also another movie that he references is also a Janet Leigh movie, and that's The Touch of Evil with Orson Welles. So the opening scene of that movie inspired this movie in terms of like the Steadicam. So even though it's from 1958 and they weren't using a Steadicam, it's a very similar point of view shot. So he references that as being a big influence of how he wanted to shoot this. So, you know, the two of those movies together, you can say, all right, well, he had this plan for a long, long time before Halloween ever happened. This is something he wanted to do. And then you can tie in that Psycho was referenced as part of the original assignment from Irwin Yablans. So in walks Jamie Lee to audition for this film not long after she was fired from her first decent role on television. And she was just looking for a new opportunity.
And how old was she around this time? Like 18, 19?
Yeah, I think
Okay.
she was 19 once they actually filmed it. So yeah, so she, I mean, if she weren't fired from that television show, she probably would have been focused on it. She wouldn't have been out looking for new opportunities. And she walks in and, you know, despite of her acting, I'm sure she did fine and they did want her, but look at that connection. I mean, that is just such a mind-blowing connection that they are so influenced by Janet Leigh, and in walks her daughter.
Mm-hmm.
Crazy. So just a little fun for those who like to believe in fate, that, you know, they really believe that there was a lot of accidental things that just were, all the stars just aligned for this to happen.
But, I mean, what about Debra Hill wanting Jamie Lee Curtis really badly? Like, did that happen after she walked in? Or was that before? Like, was Debra Hill like, we got to get her?
My understanding is that it was not until she walked in.
Oh, okay.
So I'm not for sure. I don't know how it was planned. I don't know who told Jamie Lee about the audition. I don't know if they reached out and contacted her. I do know that after they decided on her, because they had it narrowed down to 3 people. So they didn't just say, "Hey, let's get her." You know, they were auditioning other people. But Debra Hill said, "You know, let's call her. Let's just go ahead. Let's not make her worry about it. Let's just go ahead and let her know." And, you know, John Carpenter's not an emotional person. Like, he didn't really think that was necessary. But so they make the phone call. And Jamie Lee said, because she had just been fired from that show, you know, that it was a normal thing for you to get phone calls telling you that you don't get something.
Mm-hmm.
So she said that phone call made her very nervous, that she wasn't expecting, you know, to get a good phone call. But yeah.
All right. That's fate. The fate of Halloween. And now it's all wrapped up in your soul.
Right. I mean, obviously that's why I was born in 1978. I'm a part of it.
Mm-hmm.
So, do you want to tell us a little bit about our monster and its rules?
Yeah, so I have this, I was reading an analysis from somebody. Let's see, Deep Focus Review. So I found this really cool analysis about Michael Myers, where I'm just going to like read some from what I found. So they're saying that Michael Myers is the epitome of 1970s uncertainty. He is the unknown, the inexplicable. He has no motivations, no reason for killing. His methods are just as mysterious. He's a voyeur. He watches from a distance, studying his prey. Even when the camera takes another perspective, it's so that the viewer can feel like he's watching us. And when he attacks, he does so at a measured pace, from which his soon-to-be victims run hopelessly away. He seems to be made of flesh and blood, but he's shot 6 times at close range in the end, and he survives. He penetrates every mechanism designed to keep the average American safe. He's escaped the mental hospital that kept him locked away. So-called specialists could not define his sickness. The law is helpless to stop him. The parents who should be protecting their children are mysteriously absent. And so the children become the prey of a monster that quite simply defies any traditional conception or understanding. He is, as the schoolboy Tommy Doyle remarks, the boogeyman, an unstoppable force that cannot be explained with logic, rationality, or science. There are no rules. There's no rules for Michael Myers.
Okay, so let's talk for a moment about the cinematography. So the cinematography in Halloween, it skillfully employs camera movement, lighting, point of view shots, composition to build tension. They, you know, were trying to create a sense of dread and keep us on the edge of our seats. So I think they did all of that very well.
Mm-hmm.
As I mentioned before, the cinematographer was Dean Kounde. And, it's a significant factor in why this film has such a lasting impact. You know, as I mentioned earlier, the Steadicam, or I believe it was called the Panaglide that they were using, that allowed them to shoot stuff like just very, single shot shoots. They could just walk with it. It was very free flowing for the person wearing it. So that really helped them with their budget and their time constraints. But that actually, gives you a perspective of the killer at times. Like You're in his point of view walking. Or it can be the opposite of like you feel like you're being watched by it. And then they also, use the point of view shots, which again are a lot from his perspective. Like at the very beginning when he picks up the mask and puts it on, you're seeing through the eye holes of the mask. It creates a sense of voyeurism, which makes you a little bit more uneasy. And then there's a lot of long takes, like the stalking scenes. It's creating that sense of dread again, or like some type of setting you up for some type of shock. And then the lighting and the shadows is really crucial, like those scenes towards the end of the movie where Michael is in the shadow. And once you take a second glance, you start to see him. He starts to become a little bit lighter. And then we've got, the color palette. It was supposed to be autumn, even though it's April in California. They were trying to pick shades of autumn, like orange and brown, to make it feel more seasonal and atmospheric. So, and they also, there is just a little bit of blood. They say this is a movie with no blood, but there is a little bit of blood. They did the bright red to make it stand out, kind of like the old giallo film. To me, the cinematography is the key of all of it. That's what's really bringing it all together.
It makes me think of because you've got that point of view kind of thing happening in Black Christmas and a little bit in Jaws. So I'm kind of curious to find out what they use there. But yeah. Anyway.
Yeah, I think the one in Black Christmas is the Steadicam.
Is it? Okay.
Yeah, which is the competitor of the one they use for this movie. So that takes us to the music. I know you love the music for this movie.
No, I do like the theme song, like the opening theme song. I guess I think the rest of it, when they get further into it, the music, when you get beyond that like opening part, like it kind of gets a little bit repetitive in the movie. But
right,
yeah, I like it. It's that it makes you like, if you think about it, back then it's like it's got the 5/4 timing, like the weird time, like it's not the typical timing, and it just makes things feel a little bit unsettled with that timing. But what do you have to say about the music?
Well, one of the first things I ever heard John Carpenter say years back in an interview was how he came up with the pattern, the dun 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 dun, and that's always stuck with me. That his father was a musician, and that his father taught him, I believe, on hand bongos that pattern, which was. So he just started with that. That was a pattern that always stuck in his head. So he sat down at the piano and just started playing different notes with that pattern. So I found that kind of interesting. And we have to remember also that John Carpenter, he's a huge fan guy, but he's also a huge music guy. He had his own band at the time. So he really wanted to do this score. That was a part of his agreement that he wanted. So, it's simple, it's minimal. We've got some nice, fun synthesizer, electronic sounds of the 70s. The repetition is supposed to build that sense of anticipation. It's kind of, there's some unsettling ambiance, which I think might be the part that you don't like. The doo, those type of noises. It's supposed to get under your skin, but it also can get on your nerves, because they do, have that theme several times. But what I like is that there are theme variations, so even though it is the same theme, it does change a few times. And one thing I would point out, which is just kind of funny, is, and I just noticed this probably a week ago, is that at the very beginning, when before he kills the sister and he's outside of the house, there's an owl. Just one owl hooting. And I swear that owl is hooting a variation of the theme. It's very subtle, but I've listened to it over and over now because I'm like, am I losing my mind? But no, I think it's on purpose. So it's like the theme is coming in from all kinds of different places in the movie.
So a real owl, or do you feel like they...
Yeah, I think it is
added.
Yeah, I
think
it's a real owl, and they've just kind of put it at a pattern to make it kind
okay.
of go with their patterns. Yeah. So that's kind of cool.
I'll have to look for that.
Very small detail. So what did you think about the ending of this movie?
I wrote down that it made me think of Scream, which is kind of weird but not really, because I saw Scream first. And there's a ton of Halloween references in Scream, and they talk about the Mackenzies and blah, blah, blah. So the first time that I watched it, I was thinking of Scream a lot, but I don't know. I don't really have any big thoughts about it. It's just, I guess it's like he never dies, you know? He just never dies, and I don't know. What do you think?
Well, I mean, we've got our obvious ones, like the final girl, you know, she triumphs very poorly, but she does. She fights him off. She survives. So it's kind of the beginning of the final girl trope that we now, you know, we'll see for the next 8 million years. I think evil endures. So he's unstoppable. Like, that's the idea of he took 5 bullets, he fell, and now he's gone. That there's something evil that's supernatural that's going to endure. And then that creates the unresolved threat, kind of like, where is he? Right? And now you're in the suburb. And where is he? Is he going to another house? There's that lingering dread, kind of like the It Follows thing. And also, I mean, then that leads us to the very final scene of all the camera shots of like different houses on the street and stuff. Like, they're showing that nice, quiet neighborhood, but also he could be anywhere, you know. So, and that's a cinematic parallel to Psycho. There's a scene in Psycho like that, which is kind of cool. So, you know, to me, the ending is okay. My understanding is that they didn't know if they would do a sequel. I think they kind of, you know, they were going to do this and they were going to move on to their other projects. They weren't really planning, you know, for a sequel. So there is actually an alternate ending that they had discussed. I don't know if they actually filmed it, but so the alternate ending, the only difference is that after Michael falls, he doesn't disappear. He lays there and, you know, they get up close to him and you can see that he's breathing and he's still alive. And then that would be the end of the movie. You know, so maybe there's more coming. But my understanding is that by him disappearing, and then they show the neighborhood and all that, is that it's to tie it all together with her final line of, that was the boogeyman. And then he says, yes, that was the boogeyman, is that he is supernatural. He is the shape. He is the darkness. He's the thing that lurks in the shadows, the thing that is under your bed. You know, that was kind of the ending they were going for in case there wasn't a sequel.
I feel like it's hard for me to see that as the ending, because I, for some reason, have watched the opening of part 2 like 4 times, because I keep sitting down meaning to watch part 2 and then I don't get through it for whatever reason. So I've seen that opening like 4 or 5 times. So they all just roll together to me.
So what was your favorite kill? Did you have one?
I mean, I don't know that I have a favorite kill, but I mean, the one that stands out the most to me is when he stabs the guy and he's like up on the, was it in the wall? Like, he stabs him and he's like hanging in the wall. I mean, that's a really memorable one.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I guess that is to show us his strength, because that's pretty unrealistic. I mean, you'd have to stab that knife deeply in the wall to support that person's weight. That is an interesting kill, I guess. Yeah, my favorite is the Annie death in the car, because that's a pivotal moment in the film, but I think it's like very masterfully executed. Just all of it. Her singing her little Paul song.
Oh, Paul. Oh, Paul. I can no longer stop.
You know, she gets in the car and she's like, why is there condensation on the window? And then after he strangles her, which is hilarious and so dramatic, all the faces. when her face hits the steering wheel and honks the horn. That is hilarious to me because, it takes so much pressure to honk the horn. Imagine in a 1970s vehicle how much more pressure it would have taken. Like, that was just totally unrealistic, but I love that scene. But it also, like, it further establishes that Michael Myers is just completely unrelentless,
Yeah.
that he is going to kill them.
You're making me want to rewatch that scene.
You should.
I think I will. And I'm going to look for the owl.
Yes. So this takes us down to our fun facts and trivia.
I only have one thing. Do you have...
Okay.
You probably have a bunch.
I have a bunch.
The one thing that I had that I thought was really interesting that I think maybe everybody knows at this point is that the leaves on the trees are not actually changing. They are green with painted leaves laying around, and you can see palm trees because this is California.
Yes. Well, to add a little note to your leaves, so Tommy Lee Wallace, he bought 3 bags worth of leaves and painted them to make them have fall color.
Mm-hmm.
And then they would throw them, or put them in front of a fan. And then they would pick them up and they'd do it again because they were so expensive.
Mm-hmm.
But the little fun fact I have is that Robert Englund, who plays Freddy Krueger, was one of the people who helped them toss the leaves.
Really? How did he get involved?
I have no idea.
Oh my God. Okay. I did not know that.
Yeah. So the mask was purchased for under $2 at a local toy store by Tommy Lee Wallace. Their other choice that they were thinking about was called Weary Willie, and which was an Emmett Kelly character. It's a clown. You would know it if you saw it.
Yeah. Okay. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he's like the sad clown.
Yeah,
who's
you
got
sent me that.
the bald pattern. Yeah. Yeah. So I mean, that would have been a totally different look.
It's like a hobo look. It just doesn't look scary. It's just like
Right,
a hobo
yeah.
clown kind of look. Can I say hobo
Right.
clown? Is that?
I think so.
Okay.
So Nick Castle, who's the guy who plays Michael most of the time, he doesn't play him all the time. So there are a couple scenes where Tommy Lee Wallace himself was dressed up as him. There are a couple scenes where it's Debra Hill, which is kind of funny.
Yeah. I liked learning that tidbit.
Yeah, so her primary scenes were the opening shots as the child. So she is the one who picks up the knife out of the kitchen, and she's the one who's swinging her arm, killing the sister. And I think there's also a scene where she walks through the yard, maybe, across from Tommy Doyle's house, I believe. And then the brother of Erin Moran, who is famous for Happy Days and Joni Loves Chachi. So her brother, Tony Moran, is the final Michael. So, he's the one that pulls off the mask. I guess they just liked his look. So this film grossed $70 million, and they said that made it the most profitable independent film for 20 years. Some more fun facts. So there is a moment where there's a telephone operator on the phone, and that was actually Jamie Lee Curtis's mother, Janet Leigh.
Okay.
In a brief scene, Laurie is shown reading a book. She's reading The Day the Earth Stood Still by Harry Bates, which is a nod to one of John Carpenter's favorite movies. And, he loves science fiction, which, of course, we see The Thing pop up. He goes on later to do a remake of The Thing. The sound of Michael Myers breathing was created by the actor Nick Castle, who plays him. So he just, was asked to come to the microphone and breathe. So John's first film in college, he went to USC, was an 8-minute short film of a guy in a mask who follows a girl home to kill her. Sound familiar? And that little 8-minute film was called Captain Voyeur. So Nick Castle, again, who is Michael Myers, his dad was choreographer. He choreographed scenes for Fred Astaire. So people often wonder if Nick had some natural ability of being graceful and so forth, the way he walks. But in an interview, he said none of it was intentional. that, you know, it was just his natural way of walking. This was Jamie Lee Curtis's first film, which just happened to be a lead role as well. She didn't care about horror movies, and she really didn't care too much about the movie. It was just, you know, a good opportunity at the time to be a lead in a movie. And then a fun marketing idea that they had was, I don't know if they actually did this, but they had mentioned in an interview about taking Jamie Lee's face and taking Janet Leigh's face and putting them side by side for marketing to show people, you know, come check her out. This is the Scream Queen's daughter. So, of course, no one had a clue of the success that would follow, which might be the most interesting fun fact of everything that did follow. And that's the end of my fun facts and trivia.
So, next up is where we talk about sequels. And often we talk about, should there be one? Well, we have several.
Yes, we do. So I want to open this section up by just telling you a little bit about the original sequel and a fun fact I found out, which was Halloween also aired on television. So 2 years after it aired in the movie theater, you could have watched it on television on Halloween night. And NBC paid $4 million to be able to play Halloween as part of their Friday night movies.
And with inflation, that's probably completely insane.
Yes. So the reason I'm mentioning this now is they speculate that this movie was so popular that people would have stayed home to watch it. So it might have actually impacted the amount that they made at the theater for their sequel, because they aired on the same night. So then, as many of you already know, much later, we had a new Halloween and a new sequel by Rob Zombie. What were your thoughts on it?
So I have not watched part 2, but I watched the first one, and I actually really like the first Rob Zombie Halloween movie. I think it's just, I don't know, it seems like it has more like grit and more like energy and power to it. I don't know if that's, but yeah, it just has like this extra kick to it. And I just really like it. Like, I really, really like that one. I have to say that I probably like it more than the original, which, don't kill me. But I really, really like that version. What about you?
Yeah, I love the Rob Zombie ones. You know, for me, I like the first one, I like the second one, I like the third one, and then I kind of don't care about the rest until we get to the Rob Zombie ones. I think they're very good. They are very scary. Very scary. Yeah, so his second movie, it is similar to the original second one. He does change things up a bit, but it does follow along pretty well. So after the Rob Zombie movies, we then have our newest trilogy, which is David Gordon Green's, and those movies pick up right where the original Halloween left off. Have you seen those?
I have only seen the first one, and I think I'm in an interesting spot because I had only seen the first one, the original, and then I went to the theater to see Halloween, the 2018 version. So I had that interesting experience of like really seeing that as the only sequel, and just seeing her story, Laurie Strode's story, like just the fear and the anxiety that she lived in for like decades. And just, yeah, it was a really interesting experience, I think.
That is interesting.
But then like right after that, I watched Halloween H2O, and it was basically like it was like the Halloween 2018 like basically ripped off everything from H2O, and I was like, what is even happening here? Why was this even made?
Well, kind of.
There were so many scenes that were like straight out of H2O.
In H2O, when she kills him, this is just the funniest thing. She kills him, right? She cuts off his head. And you're like, well, there's no coming back from that, right?
Yeah.
And then you find out that it was actually somebody else wearing the same costume. Anyhow, yeah, that's I don't know. Yeah, for me, I saw those in the theater, like the Halloween Resurrection and H2O. And
Do you think they're
I
worth?
mean-
Do you think anything is worth watching? Like any of the sequels pre the recent trilogy? Besides, I mean, we know that you love part 3.
Yeah, I would say 1, 2, 3 are my favorite, and then the Rob Zombies, and then the new trilogy is pretty darn good.
I'm gonna watch part 3 this Halloween. Like that's my goal.
Yes, you definitely should.
I will.
Yeah, I mean the new trilogy. I mean it's all about. They're very feminist, right? They're very feminist movies about her journey, her survival through trauma, her strength. You know, her daughter's strength, her granddaughter's strength. They're very woman-focused, feminist type of horror, which I super enjoy.
Yeah, I love her character. I love the older Laurie Strode character.
Well, you're gonna love the third one in the trilogy.
I'm gonna watch those this year too. The second
I think
and third.
it's a real gem. It's got an amazing soundtrack and score. There's a lot of great suspense. It has. I think it's my favorite out of the new trilogy. So I think you'll like that.
Okay.
And then just to touch down on Season of the Witch Part 3, I think you should watch that as well. And I think it's really funny. I'm in all these different horror groups in Facebook, and people are just always knocking that movie. It will always be like the horror movie that gets the most crap because people believe it was an error. You know, like, why would you have a movie without Michael Myers when you have a zillion Michael Myers movies in this franchise? You know, they just want to forget that it exists. But, you know, the original story I've heard was that, you know, Halloween they weren't really planning on a sequel. And then when they had that opportunity, of course, they took it. You know, it was a highly profitable movie. But what they wanted to do was to have Halloween movies where each movie was a different story, that it wouldn't be Michael Myers.
Okay.
So that's what happened with Part 3. That's why he's not in it. That's why it's very sci-fi. It's a totally different kind of horror movie, different kind of Halloween horror. So you're just supposed to go in to that one just pretending Michael Myers never existed. It has nothing to do with him. But it's one of those movies that I think is very special. Kind of like when we talked about Nightmare on Elm Street Part 2. Mm-hmm. It's one of those movies that's just kind of, it's just a movie that stands on its own.
Mm-hmm.
You know, forget about it being a part of a franchise. And I think it's also special because of, you know, John Carpenter's love for sci-fi. So he was actually able to bring sci-fi and horror together. And it's very good. It's a very good movie. There are some slow parts, but overall, I think you're going to really enjoy that one.
Yeah, I did watch the opening with just like the credits and then like the opening scene, and like I was just really into the music, like the synth music that was happening at the beginning. It sets a good tone if you're going to sit down and watch like a Halloween movie.
Yeah. And the actress who plays Annie is in it.
Oh, really?
But she plays a different character. And there is a scene with an operator on the phone, and it's actually Jamie Lee's voice, even though she's not in the movie. So just some fun facts.
I feel triggered when I hear the words like we have a cameo operator voice because of our House of the Devil episode where it's like a scare because Lena Dunham.
Right.
It's like Lena Dunham keeps popping up in these horror movies. And it's like such a scare, but okay. Yeah.
Yeah, I think Jamie Lee being that voice in Part 3 is a nod back to Part 1 that her mother is a voice on the phone. So there's just a couple more things I wanted to mention, and then we can dive into our awards. So the first thing I wanted to mention was if you're a Halloween fan and you haven't already seen it, you should look up the extra footage, and it's about 11 to 12 minutes. So how that came to was when it aired on the television on NBC on that Friday night in 1980, they needed more footage. So they actually filmed another 11 to 12 minutes of footage. But
why did they need more footage?
Well, I think the movie, they had to cut out some scenes, right? They had to cut out nudity for television.
Okay.
So they cut out a few minutes, and then, of course, they've got the advertising, the commercials. So they were trying to fill a full 2 hours. So they had to revisit a few scenes. And Debra Hill wrote those scenes. She flew in, to produce it, to, get it filmed. So I just want to talk about those scenes very briefly. Some of the things that you would have seen.
Wait, but I have a question. Did they get paid to do this? Like, did John Carpenter get paid to like make some new scenes, especially if they were paying like $4 million?
Right. I think this was a part of the 4 million.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
It was part of that agreement. So the first scene that we see is Dr. Loomis. He's sitting in an auditorium and he's talking to a couple people. And at this point, it's been 6 months that Michael has been in this facility after he killed his sister. So he's still like 6, 7 years old. And basically, Dr. Loomis is saying, I have been observing him for 6 months, and you need to put him in, a maximum security facility. And they're just like, what? This is a child, right? And they're just not going to do that. They're telling him what they're going to do, and he's making recommendations. So it's that type of scene. And then they ask him basically if he wants to continue on with Michael or not. And he says, yes, he's going to continue. Well, then he goes to Michael's room and he tells Michael, basically, you really pulled the wool over their eyes, however he says it. But, like you've got them fooled. Congratulations. It's just kind of some little snarky comments. Of course, Michael says nothing to him as he stares out the window. Another scene in that 12 minutes is he goes to Michael's room. I believe this is when Michael has escaped. Mm-hmm. So, we see him escape at the beginning of our movie. But this extra footage was, he goes in there to look at what's happened, to look at how he's been living and all that. So his room is a complete mess. So I kind of feel like people should watch this footage just to see this room. The room is a complete mess. And the little interesting part is when they shut the door, he has carved on the wall sister. And I feel like that one shot is what created the whole, lore of Laurie Strode is his sister. And I don't think that is what was intended at all. I feel like he killed his sister. He was 6, and he was told for the next 15 years that in 15 years, you're going to be tried as an adult for killing your sister. And I feel like he had this trauma associated with that word, his whole life. And that's why he carved it on the door. But, I think people, the powers that be with the sequels really like grasped onto that. Like, oh, he went to kill his other sister. But yeah, so they just show you that room, and that he, broke out. And I guess he broke the other people out as he walked down the hallway. And that's why they were all outside. Another scene that I felt was the most significant probably out of these extra scenes was inside of Laurie's house. So you actually go into Laurie's house, and she's in the living room. And Linda comes to the door, and Linda's like, I want to borrow your shirt for tonight. And she's like giving her a hard time wanting to borrow her shirt for the dance or whatever, She's like, you're not going to wear it anyway. You're not going to the dance. I want your shirt. But what's interesting about the scene and why it felt like it was really important was they're talking about Michael Myers, because Laurie has just seen him upstairs when she looks out her window, which we see in the movie. He's in the backyard with the laundry that's hanging. So she's telling her that. She's like, did you see that guy out there? He was just in my backyard. But then Linda jumps in and she's like, yeah, he's been following me too. And they kind of have this conversation about, which makes it, to me, it made it a little bit more creepy that they're talking about being stalked. And then the phone starts ringing. And she's afraid to pick it up, but she picks it up and it's Annie. And Annie's saying the same thing. Can I borrow your shirt for the dance? And then she's talking about the stalker with them. So I felt that scene was actually, I kind of wish that were in the actual movie. But there you have it. You can go out on YouTube and just pull up, the extra scenes from the TV version of Halloween, if you're interested in watching them.
Yeah. So, next up, we're getting to the end here, is to give this movie awards for what we like best. So, let's start with you, Ketchum. What's your first one?
Oh, okay. Let's see. Where do I want to start? Okay, I think I'll say my biggest award for last, the one that has like real impact. And I want to say, I'm going to give an award to Tommy and Lindsay. I thought they both were great child actors.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't talk at all about Lindsay, but she is in the Housewives of Orange County. So you might know her from there if you're not already aware. Her sister is in it, and then she is occasionally in it. And her sister was in some popular movies, such as Escape from Witch Mountain. But yeah, I thought Tommy and Lindsay were great child actors. I thought they did very well. I was very excited to see Lindsay in the new trilogy. I was very unexcited to not see Tommy in the new movie. I really wanted Tommy to return, but unfortunately, Tommy is played by
Anthony Michael Hall.
Yeah. So Tommy's played by Anthony Michael Hall in the new movies, which I was very disappointed in that.
You were very upset about that.
I was.
For
Do you
a long
remember?
time. Yes, I very clearly remember. You were very upset.
I mean, on my rewatch, I wasn't as upset, but yeah, I thought everybody was coming back, and I was excited to see Tommy because I thought he was such a great child actor, I give an award to the glasses over the sheet after Michael has killed the boyfriend, and he puts his glasses on over the sheet. I thought that was really funny.
That's one of my awards, is him putting on the ghost sheet. That whole scene is like hilarious.
And then that whole next scene where she's on the phone and she's being choked and Laurie's like not believing it, right? I give an award to, while we're in that house, the carnival horror house shot, which was completely unnecessary and hilarious, where each body is just like in these weird poses, like you're inside of a horror house at a carnival,
Mm-hmm.
And I think I watched it several times before I even realized that that's what it looked like. When she reveals each dead body, they're in these weird positions. I'm giving Laurie an award for the way she says carving jack-o'-lanterns. I would imitate it, but I really can't.
I don't remember that. Maybe you'll have to find a clip.
Yeah, I think she's in the car with Annie talking about carving jack-o'-lanterns with Tommy Doyle, but she just says it really goofy, and I just love it.
What's the pumpkin for? I brought it for Tommy. I figured carving a jack-o'-lantern would keep him occupied. Well,
I'm giving an award to Annie for her little Paul song, and to Jamie Lee for her "I Wish I Had You All Alone." Because John Carpenter loves music, so of course they had to add some little original songs in there. And then the award that I'm going to say for last, because it's actually kind of serious, is what I like most, I think, about the movie is that it's really relevant still in our current present day as far as social issues. And we saw this in It Follows as well, which is where they're bringing the danger to the suburbs. And it's such a real type of danger because, this whole stalking thing, it's like what some women go through every single day, being watched, being followed, being stalked, and not being believed, even by, even woman to woman. Her friends aren't believing her. It's just very real, and it's very simple, and it's proof that you don't always need a complex story or a huge budget. You just need a good story. So that is my ultimate award for them.
Well, I had two more here, which the fun, super basic one is when they're smoking the joint in the car. I love it. And Laurie Strode is like taking the joint with two fingers. She's holding it with both hands. She manages to hold a joint with both hands, and she's trying, and she's not very good at it. And I just thought that was hilarious. My other award would be the music itself, which Ketchum already went over, the importance of this music and all of that. But I would give an award to the music itself and the use of the music within the movie. It's iconic, and it's like one of the most popular. I mean, even still, 45 years later, you play that, everybody knows what that song is.
Right.
It stood the test of time. It still is. It's iconic.
Yeah.
And those are my awards. So, next up we get to the rating. So,
Well, I give it a 5, but
well,
I can't wait to
you
hear
actually
what you
gave
have
it like
to
a
say.
1 million before we hit record.
Yeah. I think it was 5,482,000.
I mean, if I'm rating this, it's really just my enjoyment of it. I mean, I totally understand like the relevant, like the historical relevance of this movie and the importance of it and all of that stuff. But for my actual like enjoyment of this movie is probably like a 3-ish,
Mm-hmm.
Whereas like with the Rob Zombie version, I would probably give that like a 4. It's like my enjoyment of that version is like just up there. And I might have even enjoyed watching Halloween 2018 even more than the original. It's just, I don't know what it is about the original, but it's just, I don't know.
Too simple?
I don't know. It's maybe that's it. Maybe it's just like too simple. I don't like saying that though, because I feel like I can watch a simple movie and enjoy it.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know. It's just there's something that isn't clicking for me like the way like the Rob Zombie version did or like the reboot. But I understand it's a classic and I see the importance of it and the value of it. And like you said, we could sit and talk about this for 20 hours. I think you did a great job at condensing everything down into like the most important points, the most interesting stuff. So good job there. Because
we were both worried.
We were a little bit worried because Ketchum was like, yeah, I think I could like make an entire podcast about this, which you could.
Once you start digging, it's like rabbit hole after rabbit hole. Like I feel like I'm at the tip of the iceberg. There's so much more out there for fans to learn if they just dig around.
Yeah, and I think you brought up a lot of really interesting points, like what you were just saying, your last award point is really interesting. I never thought about it like that, where you're just like, yeah, this is even like this is women not being listened to. Like that whole thing that you just went into. I was like, oh, I never thought about this movie in that way, and that's totally true. So that was a really interesting point. So, I guess it's time to wrap it up.
Well,
do you have anything else?
You're making me want to ask you a question.
Oh yeah.
Is there any scene in the movie that made you uncomfortable? Like not necessarily scared you, but something that was like that type of suspense where you're just like, did you feel that in this movie?
Maybe that's the problem, is that I don't think that I really do. Like, I don't really watch this and feel any kind of like suspense or tension or anything.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe that's because the first time that I watched it, you just know what happens. Like, that, like, because I didn't watch it, like, I watched it, like, early 2010s. So, like, I know that there's a million more movies. I know that he's still alive.
Right.
I think I knew that Laurie Strode was still alive to go on to, like, another movie, at least one more movie.
Mm-hmm.
And he doesn't really seem scary to me. Michael Myers isn't really very scary to me. And, like, that, I guess that's the other thing. He just kind of slowly walks around and he doesn't ever speak. So it's very unlike like Ghostface and Scream or like Freddy Krueger or like any number of like villains where they have a personality.
Mm-hmm.
But that was the point of Michael Myers, is to just make him like blank. He's just evil. So, but I think that's maybe also why I have a hard time with it, is because he's almost like a zombie, just like a slow walking zombie that's just gonna get you. And he never dies. Right. He never goes away. He's just always there.
Yeah. Yeah, I actually heard that I might have been H2O at some point when Jamie Lee signed a new contract. It said in it that he will never die.
Yeah, I heard that.
Yeah, and that she was like, what? Like, like she wanted her character to get to the point where she could kill it. So, it's like, well, then that kind of changes her whole perspective of these films, herself.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah. So for me, the only moment in the movie where I truly feel that kind of uneasy point is when she has returned after finding her friends dead, and she's trying to get Tommy's attention to come unlock the door. And he is wiping his eye because he's half asleep. He's looking out the window and he's like, yeah.
Who is it? Tommy, open up, it's me!
And it's that moment where I'm like, this kid is not going to walk down the stairs fast enough. You know, it's like, it's just perfectly timed. Like they show him as he opens the door, like he's so slow, like, okay, I'll let you in. And it's like, that's the moment for me in the movie where I'm like, oh my God. It gets me every time.
And you'll probably watch it tomorrow and the next
Or
day.
tonight.
It'll be good for you to fall asleep to tonight.
Well, that brings us to the end of yet another episode. So be sure to join us next week when we dive deep into House of 1,000 Corpses by Rob Zombie.
I cannot wait. I'm so excited. It's such a Halloween movie. It's so fun.
I don't think I've seen it since the first time I saw it, like when it was new. I don't think I've rewatched it, so it'll be good. And that's the one with one of my favorite characters, right? Captain Spaulding, isn't he in that movie?
Yes.
I love that character.
Yeah.
So,
Oh God, it's so fun. It's been out for 20 years now.
until then, you can find us online. We're on Instagram and Facebook at AA Horror Highway. Our email is aahorrorhighway@gmail.com. You can find us on Twitter at Horror Highway, which is Horror HWY. And our website is also horrorhwy.com.
And you could find me on TikTok.
Oh, yes.
At
Don't
Amy
forget.
Kasio,
Amy Kasio.
with a K.
Yeah, you guys should definitely go check it out. You know, she's got a lot of fun videos out there right now. So our horror hotline is always open to calls from the fans who feel so inclined.
Please leave
We
us
love
some
to
spooky
receive your messages. Yes, come on, people. Leave us the messages. We're begging you. 662-AA. You've been listening to the AA Horror Highway. I'm Amy Ketchum.
And I'm Amy Kasio.
See you next time.
Oh, Paul.